I still shudder when I think back to that ill-fated Tinder date. Jason seemed perfectly normal at first, polite, friendly, and easy to talk to. We met up a few times at restaurants around town, and the conversation flowed smoothly. He was charming in a low-key way and didn't set off any alarm bells. Looking back now, I realize I ignored some subtle red flags. But at the time, he simply came across as a bit socially awkward and quirky. So when he invited me back to his place after dinner one night, I didn't think much of it. The apartment was dimly lit and minimally furnished. I noticed a few strange objects placed around the living room, a motion sensor next to the TV, a decorative clock on the bookcase. At the time, I thought they were just kitschy knickknacks, albeit with an unusual retro tech look. Jason offered me a drink, and we sat talking on the couch. After a while, he started moving closer, putting his arm around me. I gently moved away, suggesting it was getting late and I should head home. A brief look of anger flashed across his face, but he quickly smiled and said he understood. As I gathered my things to leave, I noticed another odd device tucked beside the couch, a small black box with a tiny lens. Jason saw me looking at it and explained it was part of his surround sound system. I took him at his word, not wanting to seem paranoid or accuse him of anything untoward. Over the next few days, I started receiving suggestive messages from unfamiliar social media accounts. The anonymous users made references to things Jason and I had spoken about and places we had been together. I was confused and unsettled. One message included a link to a website I had never heard of. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. To my horror, it opened to a page full of videos of me. Video of me sitting on the couch at Jason's apartment. Video of us across the dinner table at the restaurants we had gone to. I felt sick as I realized the motion sensors, clocks, and other devices had been hidden cameras. Jason had recorded every moment of our dates without my knowledge or consent. I immediately blocked Jason's number and all his social accounts. The invasive violation of my privacy shook me to my core. How long had he been filming women like this? Did he edit or upload the video somewhere else online? The thought of strangers watching footage of me in what I believed were private settings made my skin crawl. I reported the videos and the website to the police, but they said there was little they could do. The page hosting the videos was registered anonymously overseas. All I could do was monitor my name online to ensure the videos didn't resurface somewhere else. I tightened my social media security settings to maximum privacy. I combed through Jason's profiles and our chat history to see if there were any other clues about his motivations, or if he had done this to other women too. But his digital footprint offered few insights. From then on, I was much more cautious about online dating. I scrutinized men's profiles, reading between the lines for any subtle red flags. I asked probing questions and did full background checks before meeting up. I met only in crowded public places, avoiding isolated areas. I refrained from going to their homes too soon. It took a long time to start trusting people again after the trauma of being unknowingly exploited online by someone I had considered a romantic interest. I became hyper-vigilant about my safety and privacy. If I did go to someone's home, I covered any potential cameras and recording devices, scoping out the space thoroughly. You can never be too careful. The experience taught me tough lessons about protecting my privacy in the digital age. You truly never know someone's motivations or what they might do behind your back with a couple of hidden cameras. My sense of security was shattered, but over time I became more vigilant about looking out for red flags and protecting myself. I joined support groups to find community with other women who had endured similar violations of consent. It helped to know I was not alone, though we collectively struggled with paranoia and trying to date safely again. The internet has opened up terrifying new avenues for deception, manipulation, and violating consent. I learned that lesson the hard way. While I still believe there are good people out there, I proceed with much more caution. It took time to regain my sense of safety and belief that healthy, ethical romance is possible. I share my story to help other women avoid going through the same horrific experience. By learning to spot the warning signs and being proactive about security, we can mitigate at least some of these emerging digital threats. It's a strange new world of modern courtship, but with vigilance and compassion, connection is still possible. I choose to remain cautiously optimistic. Even years later, I still have trouble fully trusting romantic partners. I analyze their every word and action, looking for any hint of manipulative or unethical behavior. The experience with Jason fundamentally changed my outlook on relationships. My faith in true love has been shaken, but not completely broken. With each new person I date, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt while also keeping my guard up. I look for genuine empathy, emotional intelligence, and respect for boundaries. I take things slow, getting to know them fully before developing real intimacy. Once bitten, twice shy, as the saying goes. I no longer blame myself for what happened with Jason. The fault lies entirely with him for deceiving me and violating my consent. But the incident made me wise up quickly about the dangers lurking in modern digital courtship. We have to adapt to this new environment where motives aren't always what they seem. My closest friends know my history and support me in vetting any potential partners. I value their outside perspective to spot red flags I might miss. Though initially embarrassed about sharing my story, I've realized my experience can help protect other women too. Awareness and vigilance are our best defenses in this brave new world of romance. While I wish the traumatic incident with Jason had never happened, in a strange way it empowered me. I learned to stand up for myself and be more assertive about protecting my boundaries. Instead of withdrawing from the world, I stepped forward to face it with new confidence. Knowledge is power, even if gained the hard way. Though occasionally I still feel that familiar anxiety in new relationships, I try not to let fear rule me. With thoughtful precautions, I can balance safety with openness. Getting intimate with someone, emotionally and physically, always requires some leap of faith. I won't let one bad experience deprive me of human connection, though now I'm wise enough to look before I leap. Navigating modern digital dating culture requires awareness, boundaries, and compassion for yourself and others. With wisdom gained from hard experience, I move forward cautiously, but with an open heart. Wounded but not broken, I retain hope that healthy relationships are still possible. Though darker motives often lurk online, there is still light to be found. I never thought something like this could happen to me. I'm just an average girl living a normal life, but I guess you never really know what darkness lurks inside other people. It started innocently enough. I was out with friends when a cute guy approached me and started chatting. He was friendly and charming, so I didn't think much of giving him my number when he asked. We texted back and forth for a few days and really hit it off. When he asked me out on a date, I gladly accepted. Things were going great until I started noticing strange occurrences. Random people would come up to me on the street, calling me by name and referencing things only someone close to me would know. It'd start yelling at me about being lied to and led on. I had no idea who these people were or what they were talking about. I was so confused. Eventually it clicked. Someone must have created a fake Tinder profile using my photos. They were using this fake profile to match with people, gain their trust, and then ghost them or stand them up. These angry strangers thought I was a person who had tricked them. I was horrified. Who would do something so twisted? I tried reporting the profile to Tinder, but they said they couldn't find it. This catfish knew how to avoid detection. Meanwhile, the uncomfortable confrontations kept happening. Some people cried about feeling betrayed. Others screamed obscenities at me. One man even grabbed my arm and had to be pulled away by his friend. I was paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder wherever I went. I felt violated, knowing my identity was being misused by this malicious impersonator. They were still out there pretending to be me, luring in new victims. Things escalated when I started receiving threatening messages. This person I had never met seemed to be stalking me, referencing my daily routine and locations I frequented. The messages warned me to stop interfering. I was too scared to leave my apartment. I kept the lights on and barricaded the door at night. In a desperate attempt to reclaim control, I took down all my social media profiles. But it was too late. This criminal had all my photos and info. Removing my digital footprint wouldn't deter them. The creepy messages persisted, promising they weren't done with me yet. I didn't know what else to do, so I went to the police. After showing them the barrage of messages, they agreed this was stalking and harassment. But without more evidence, they said there wasn't much they could do. It seemed I had become the twisted obsession of someone I'd never even met in real life. I hoped if I laid low for a while, they would lose interest and move on. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. This was the beginning of a nightmare I'll be trying to wake up from for a long time. My trust in others is shattered. I'm constantly suspicious of people's motives and intentions now. I never wanted to be in the public eye or garner attention from strangers. I just wanted a simple, happy life. But someone decided to use my identity to manipulate and hurt others, trading on my good reputation to get away with it. Now my life will never be the same. The frightening messages continued to arrive daily. His stalker knew no boundaries. They described my bedroom, my car, my jewelry. possessions only someone close to me would be familiar with. The notes taunted me, asking how it felt to be the hunted rather than the hunter. I was certain I was being watched, even in my own home. I became a recluse, rarely going out except to work. I would only get the essentials at the grocery store before rushing back home. When I did go out, I wore baggy clothes and sunglasses to avoid being recognized. But this predator always knew where to find me. My mental health started to suffer. I had trouble sleeping and barely ate. I would break down in tears at random times, overwhelmed by fear and helplessness. I lost weight rapidly. My productivity at work plummeted. All I could think about was how to escape this nightmare. In a last-ditch effort to protect myself, I moved to stay with family in another state. I changed my phone number, deleted social accounts, and got a new car. But somehow the stalker tracked me down again. My family didn't understand the gravity of the danger. It told me to just ignore it. Then one night, my tormentor took things to the next level. I awoke to the sound of someone trying to break in. Terror seized me as I realized the stalker had come for me in person this time. I heard the glass of the back door shatter as they forced their way inside. I hid in my closet and dialed the police, heart pounding, unable to breathe. As I listened to the intruder rampage through the house, I truly feared for my life. The waiting minutes for police to arrive felt endless. At last, sirens approached, and I heard the stalker flee out the back. Officers swept the property and found no one. But I could hardly feel relieved. My safe haven had been violated. This criminal now knew no limits, and the police had no leads on their identity or how to stop them. I could only wonder bleakly if I would be another tragic stalking statistic. When I end up assaulted, kidnapped, or worse. That horrific break-in was the final straw. With my family finally understanding the severity of the danger, we hatched a plan. No more hiding. It was time to disappear. We liquidated assets and erased connections tying me to that life. New documents were forged for my new identity. Leaving everything and everyone I knew behind was painful, but it was the only way to break free of this obsession threatening to destroy me. I had to make a clean start in a place this predator could never find me. As I boarded the plane to my new beginning, I took one last look at the city that had been my home. My heart ached for the normal life that was stolen from me, but hope flickered knowing I had reclaimed control. I was bound for a peaceful place free of fear and shadows. This time, I would be the one doing the hunting, for light, joy, and freedom. It all started with a casual Tinder match one night. I was swiping through the app, as I often did when I was bored and looking to connect with someone new. The monotony of everyday life had me craving excitement, and the thrill of matching with attractive strangers was addictive. I came across a profile that immediately caught my eye. A cute guy with a charming smile and a witty bio that made him seem so interesting. We matched right away, and he quickly sent me a message. I felt a rush of excitement as I realized this virtual encounter could lead to something more. We started chatting, and he seemed nice enough at first. We had some playful banter back and forth that I found amusing. As we talked more, we realized we actually had quite a few things in common and similar tastes in music, movies, etc. After a while, the conversation turned flirtatious, and he started to become a bit more forward with his comments. I went along with it, enjoying the attention and validation after having been single for so long. Before long, we were exchanging intimate photos. In the heat of the moment, I didn't even think about the risk involved. All I could focus on was how attractive I found him, and how much I craved the thrill of this passionate virtual encounter. He seemed trustworthy enough after our conversations, and I was too caught up in the excitement of the new connection to consider potential consequences. Over the next few days, we continued messaging frequently, and the tension continued building through our provocative exchanges. I found myself thinking about him a lot, and constantly checking my phone in anticipation of his next message. But then things took an abrupt, sinister turn. Out of nowhere, he started making demands, threatening to share the intimate photos I had sent with my family and friends, even threatening to send them to my workplace if I didn't send him money right away. I was horrified. This friendly, charming guy I had been connecting with had turned into a dangerous, manipulative stranger. I immediately told him to leave me alone, that I wanted nothing more to do with him, but he persisted with his threats, which became more and more aggressive. He even started hinting that he knew where I lived. I had never shared that information, so just the fact that he mentioned it left me feeling deeply unsettled and frightened. How could I have misjudged someone so completely? I had no idea who this person really was. I pleaded with him to reconsider his threats, desperately trying to appeal to any semblance of decency he might have. But he was frighteningly cold and detached. All he cared about was getting what he wanted from me, no matter the emotional and psychological cost. There was zero remorse or empathy in his words. I started to panic as the gravity of the situation sank in. I knew I couldn't give in to his demands, but the thought of those intimate photos being sent to my family, friends, and coworkers left me utterly mortified and ashamed. Even though I had done nothing legally wrong, I feared being judged and shamed if those around me saw the photos. Professionally, it could threaten my job, as that kind of thing could be considered inappropriate. I felt violated and betrayed, but I also felt tremendous guilt and shame. For days, I lived in a state of constant fear and anxiety. I compulsively checked my phone, dreading the notification that would mean my worst nightmare had come true. I could barely eat or sleep. I felt trapped in a terrifying situation spinning rapidly out of control. There seemed to be no way out. Eventually, I realized I needed help. I mustered up the courage to go to the police despite feeling embarrassed about the details. The officers were thankfully sympathetic, but warned me these cases can be tricky to prosecute, especially without more hard evidence. They told me to avoid engaging with him any further, to document everything, and to let them handle things from there. I followed their instructions, but the threats kept coming. He sent me screenshots of the photos as if to prove he still had them in his possession. He even went so far as creating fake social media accounts, from which he sent harassing messages to my friends and family. The messages didn't include the photos, but they hinted that he had dirt on me which he planned to share soon. I was mortified that my loved ones could be dragged into this nightmare. The police did their best, but struggled to trace the accounts back definitively to him. I felt completely powerless and alone in my fear and shame. The unrelenting stress took an immense psychological toll. I withdrew socially, fearful of going out in public or even just interacting with friends. I couldn't focus at work. I felt irritable and on edge constantly. I started doubting people's intentions and became suspicious of anyone attempting to get close to me. The trauma of the betrayal had left me feeling distrustful and damaged. After months of this unbearable torment, I realized I had to take a stand once and for all. With the help of a tech-savvy friend, we set a trap to catch the blackmailer. Luring him into a meeting under false pretenses, my friend was able to confront him face to face and get him to delete the photos. The relief I felt in that moment was indescribable, but it didn't instantly undo all the trauma I had endured. I was shaken to my core and knew I would carry emotional scars from this experience for a long time. I have learned harsh lessons about being more careful sharing photos or details with strangers online. I felt deep distrust toward dating apps and websites now. It's been over a year now since that ordeal initially began. With time and distance, I've made progress healing, but those feelings of fear and hypervigilance occasionally still creep up on me. When they hit me, I'm transported back to those bleakest moments. But focusing on how I found strength to persevere through such a nightmare has helped me regain more confidence and optimism. I'm careful now about maintaining boundaries online and listen to my instincts more if someone seems suspicious. As harrowing as it all was, I survived the worst case scenario. I'm grateful I was able to escape relatively unscathed in the end, when things could have become so much worse if the blackmail had escalated further. I hope my cautionary tale can help others avoid finding themselves in similar situations. I learned the hard way how risky it is to share intimate content or details freely online, especially with complete strangers. While I don't blame myself for the despicable choices of my blackmailer, I do wish I had been wiser and more cautious so as to prevent the opportunity for exploitation in the first place. But all we can do is use our experiences to inform smarter decisions moving forward. It was a Friday night, and like most single women in their late 20s, I decided to try my luck on Tinder. After swiping through the usual assortment of mediocre profiles, I came across a guy who caught my eye. He had a charming smile and seemed well put together, so I swiped right. To my delight, we matched, and he initiated a conversation. We chatted for a bit, and I was pleasantly surprised by how articulate and funny he was. The conversation flowed naturally, and before long, he asked me out on a date. I agreed and we made plans to meet up at a trendy bar downtown the following evening. When the night arrived, I took extra care with my appearance, wanting to make a good impression. As I walked into the bar, I immediately spotted him sitting at a table in the corner. He looked even more handsome in person, and when he saw me, a huge smile spread across his face. We greeted each other warmly, and he offered to buy me a drink. The date was going incredibly well. He was charming, intelligent, and had a great sense of humor. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we became more and more engrossed in our conversation. I found myself captivated by him in a way I hadn't experienced with other dates. He had this magnetic energy that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. At one point, he mentioned that he lived just a few blocks away and suggested we continue our date at his place. Against my better judgment, I agreed. There was something so alluring about him that made me want to spend more time together, even if that meant going back to his apartment on a first date. As we walked to his apartment, a slight sense of unease began to creep up on me. Something about the situation didn't feel quite right, but I pushed those feelings aside, chalking it up to nerves. When we arrived at his place, he let me inside and offered me a glass of wine, which I accepted. We settled onto his couch, and the conversation continued. He was clearly making an effort to impress me, and it was working. I found myself becoming more and more drawn to him. After a while, he suggested that we move to the bedroom where he could give me a relaxing back massage. Slightly hesitant, I agreed, figuring it would be a nice way to wind down the date. Once in the bedroom, he pulled out a bottle of what he claimed was a luxurious massage oil. He began to gently rub it into my skin, and I have to admit, it felt amazing. The tension in my muscles started to melt away, and I found myself sinking deeper into the mattress. However, as the massage continued, a strange sensation started to creep over me. The oil had a peculiar, almost medicinal smell to it, and I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. My heart rate quickened, and a sense of unease washed over me. Suddenly, I felt an overwhelming need to leave. I politely told him that I needed to head home, but he insisted that I stay, saying that I seemed so relaxed and that he wanted to continue the massage. I firmly told him that I needed to go, and he reluctantly agreed, but not without trying to convince me to stay multiple times. As I made my way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I replayed the evening in my mind, trying to pinpoint what had made me so uneasy. It wasn't until the next day that I realized the true horror of the situation. While scrolling through the news, I came across a disturbing article about a serial killer who had been terrorizing the city. The details of the crimes were gruesome. The killer would lure unsuspecting women to his home, drug them, and then brutally murder them, dismembering their bodies and consuming their flesh. As I read on, my blood ran cold. The description of the killer's modus operandi matched the events of my date the night before. The charming demeanor, the invitation back to his place, the mysterious massage oil. I couldn't believe it, but all the pieces fit together. I immediately contacted the police, recounting my experience in vivid detail. They were immediately on high alert, and a manhunt for the killer was launched. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived at his apartment, he had already fled the scene, leaving behind a grisly discovery. In the killer's bedroom, the authorities found a collection of human body parts, meticulously preserved and cataloged. It was a horrific scene, and the sheer scale of his crimes was beyond comprehension. As the officers described the carnage, I felt sick to my stomach, realizing how close I had come to being another one of his victims. As the news of the killer's capture spread, I was flooded with a range of emotions: relief, horror, and a deep sense of gratitude that I had listened to my instincts and gotten out of there when I did. I couldn't help but wonder how many other women had fallen victim to this monster, and I shuddered at the thought. In the aftermath, I found myself struggling to come to terms with the experience. The thought of how close I had come to becoming one of his victims haunted me, and I found it difficult to trust people, even in the most mundane of situations. I became hypervigilant, noticing every odd look or strange behavior, even when there was likely no real threat. I decided to see a therapist to help me work through the emotional turmoil. She helped me realize that while the world can be filled with dangerous people, most are good at heart. With time and effort, I've been able to rebuild my ability to connect with others, while still exercising reasonable caution. Time has passed, and while the scars of that night will never fully heal, I've learned to move forward. I'm more cautious in my interactions with strangers, and I trust my gut instinct when something feels off. The experience has made me stronger, more resilient, and more aware of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly charming and harmless individuals. I share my story not for sympathy, but as a cautionary tale. Online dating can be a wonderful way to meet new people, but it's crucial to always maintain a healthy sense of skepticism and to never ignore the warning signs, no matter how strong the urge to ignore them might be. That night, my intuition saved me from a fate worse than death, and I'm forever grateful that I had the courage to listen to it. While I still have moments of fear and anxiety, I refuse to let one awful human being take away my ability to connect with others. I'm healing day by day and moving forward with more wisdom, strength, and self-trust than I had before. My hope is that by sharing my experience, I can empower others to listen to that inner voice and follow their instincts when something feels wrong. It could truly mean the difference between life and death. I still can't believe what happened on that fateful Tinder date. It's a night that will haunt me forever. I have been using the dating app for a while, going on numerous matches and first dates that never amounted to anything serious. But then I matched with a woman named Samantha and we hit it off immediately. Our conversation flowed naturally, and we made plans to meet up at a local coffee shop the following weekend. I was nervous, as I always am before a first date, but there was something about Samantha that put me at ease. When I arrived at the cafe and spotted her sitting at a table, my heart raced. She looked even prettier in person than in her profile photos. We hugged hello and quickly fell into an engaging discussion, losing ourselves in the conversation for over an hour. By the end of the date, I was smitten. Samantha was intelligent, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We made plans for a second date that very night. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. This felt different from my previous Tinder experiences. There was a real connection there. Our second date a few days later went just as well as the first. We grabbed dinner at a nice restaurant, and I could tell there was a mutual attraction building between us. When the night came to an end, Samantha invited me back to her place. Nervously, I agreed, and we headed to her apartment. Once inside, things started to escalate quickly. We began kissing passionately, and before long, we had moved to her bedroom. Just as things were about to go further, Samantha suddenly pulled away. She stared at me with an intense, almost angry expression on her face. It was then that she revealed her true identity. Her name wasn't actually Samantha, but rather Vanessa Blackwood, the sister of a man I had wronged years ago. I was immediately filled with dread as I remembered my bitter feud with Vanessa's brother Kyle during our college days. In a fit of jealousy, I had told a malicious lie about Kyle that cost him a relationship. The fallout had been ugly, and we hadn't spoken since. Now it seemed Vanessa had been plotting her revenge using Tinder to lure me in and confront me about what I had done. Before I could react, Vanessa produced a knife and lunged at me, slicing my arm. I cried out in pain as I scrambled off the bed and made a desperate dash for the door. Vanessa chased me, swinging the knife wildly. I managed to make it to the living room, my injured arm dripping blood. Vanessa was screaming furiously. I frantically looked around and grabbed a heavy candlestick, swinging it as Vanessa came at me again. It connected with her head and she collapsed, unconscious. Panicked, I fled the apartment and went straight to the police station to report the attack. In the aftermath, I struggled with intense anxiety, constantly looking over my shoulder and worrying Vanessa might come after me again. I installed extra locks and bought pepper spray, jolting awake from nightmares about the attack. I started therapy to deal with the trauma and PTSD. With time and support, I was able to reclaim my sense of security. The experience taught me to take responsibility for my actions. While nothing justifies Vanessa's violence, I have more empathy now for the pain I inflicted. This ordeal has left deep scars, but also given me perspective. I refuse to let it harden my heart. Instead, I will let it open my eyes to being a kinder person. If I can help someone because of the lessons learned, some good will have come of that horrific Tinder date after all. In the months after the attack, I struggled to feel comfortable dating again. I deleted all my dating apps and took a long break from putting myself out there. When I eventually re-downloaded Tinder, I was incredibly anxious those first few times swiping and matching. I decided to be upfront with any matches right away about my past traumatic experience. To my relief, the women I matched with were very understanding and we took things slow. I found that talking about it was therapeutic. After a few dates where I felt at ease, I started seeing a woman named Amy. She was patient and kind, helping me push past my lingering distrust and fear surrounding online dating. Amy and I took precautions together, meeting in public places and letting friends know where we would be. As we grew closer, my gnawing worries gradually subsided. I began feeling excitement about falling in love again instead of dread. On our 1-year anniversary, I told Amy the full story of that twisted Tinder date. We cried together for the person I used to be, and for the future we now get to build, unburdened by the ghosts of the past. When I reflect back now on that traumatic experience, I am filled with gratitude, both for my second chance at love and for the hard lessons that ultimately made me better. It took time, but I healed. That horrific Tinder date no longer defines me. I'm defined by how I picked up the pieces after, mindfully, courageously, and with an open heart full of hope. If my story helps even one person find the strength to move forward after trauma, I will be forever thankful for having lived through that fateful night and come out the other side an even stronger person. It all started about 2 months ago when I matched with Aiden on Tinder. We hit it off right away, chatting for hours about our shared interests like hiking and indie music. After a week of nonstop messaging, we met up for dinner and the connection was instant. Conversation flowed effortlessly, and we stayed until the restaurant closed, reluctant to end our date. Aiden was sweet, charming, and funny. We shared so much in common, it felt like meeting a long-lost friend. Soon we were seeing each other multiple times a week, taking weekend trips out of the city and meeting each other's friends. I started to think Aiden could be the one. Everything just felt so easy and natural together. Then one night, Aiden didn't respond to my usual good morning text. I figured they were just busy and didn't think much of it. But the next day, still nothing. By nighttime, I was really starting to worry. It wasn't like Aiden to not get back to me all day. I sent a few more texts asking if everything was okay with no reply. After 3 days of absolute silence, I was sick with worry. This disappearance seemed so out of character given how strongly we connected. I drove by Aiden's apartment, but it was dark. I even asked our mutual friends, but no one had heard from them either. Where could this person I was falling for have gone without a trace? About a week later, I got a shocking phone call. Aiden had died unexpectedly in a car accident the night after our last date. I was completely devastated. All this time I'd worried Aiden was costing me or had lost interest, when really they were gone forever. My heart ached for all the plans we'd made that would never happen. I was angry I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. In my grief, I would still text Aiden's number sometimes, sharing little updates or crying out about how much I missed them. It was silly, but it made me feel a tiny bit better. One night, I got a text back from their number that simply said, "I miss you too." I freaked out. Was this Aiden's ghost trying to reach me? Or had someone else gotten access to their phone? I continued getting sporadic texts from Aiden's number over the next few weeks. The messages were benign, like "thinking of you today" or "remember our hike last month." They provided me comfort during such a painful time. I wanted to believe it was somehow Aiden communicating from beyond. Then I got a text saying, "Can we talk about what happened?" This was my proof the messages weren't coming from Aiden, but likely someone who had their phone. I replied angrily, demanding to know who it was. They confessed to being Aiden's sibling, who couldn't bear to disconnect their phone. We met up, and I got a whole story. Losing Aiden so suddenly left a permanent hole in my heart, but getting closure about those messages helped me move forward in the grieving process. I'll never delete our text threads, keeping a record of the whirlwind romance that changed my life. Aiden showed me true love is possible, and I'll forever be grateful for our brief time together. Though they're gone, the impact they made will remain. I think back fondly on our first meeting, when we stayed talking in the restaurant until they had to kick us out at closing time. The way Aiden's eyes lit up when describing a favorite album. How our hands brushed walking side by side through the farmer's market. Sharing childhood stories while stargazing on a camping trip. The feel of Aiden's shoulder as a pillow during a long drive. It seemed like we had all the time in the world to explore this special connection. But in an instant, Aiden was ripped away and our future vanished. I was left heartbroken, confused, and searching for meaning. Why give me such an amazing glimpse of love, only to take it away? In my darkest moments, I was angry at Aiden for leaving me so abruptly. But underneath, I knew it wasn't their fault. I had to make peace with the unpredictability of life and loss. Aiden taught me so much in our short time together. To open myself to love with less fear and boundaries. That the right person will feel like coming home. Life is fleeting, so we must appreciate each moment. Though I'll always have an Aiden-shaped hole in my heart, I don't regret taking a chance on love. Our time together was a gift. Aiden showed me the kind of relationship I want, and now I can seek that again with less hesitation. I know what it feels like to find the one, even if it's slipped away. Losing Aiden so traumatically will forever be part of my story. But I'm determined to not let grief close my heart. When the time is right, I'll be open to a new love, one that builds on all Aiden gave me. I still think of Aiden every day and send love their way, trusting our souls remain connected. Though our time was cut short, Aiden will always be my first real love, the one who opened my world to the power of true connection. For however long we get, I will cherish each moment and person. Aiden gifted me a new perspective on life and love that I'll carry forward. I'll never forget that fateful night. It started out like any other Tinder date. I matched with a seemingly nice guy named Jerome. We chatted for a bit and decided to meet up for drinks. When he suggested getting dinner at his place instead, I didn't think much of it. I was excited to finally meet someone in person after all the typical Tinder letdowns. Jerome greeted me at the door and immediately complimented my appearance. He was charming and personable, and I felt at ease in his cozy apartment. As we sat down to eat, he casually mentioned that he was a doctor. I was impressed, a successful medical professional, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. After dinner, he offered to give me a quick checkup, saying he'd noticed I seemed a bit under the weather. Tough as I was, I agreed, thinking it was a thoughtful gesture. He led me to what looked like a makeshift examination room in the back of his apartment. I hopped up on the table as he gathered his equipment. Something felt off, but I tried to push aside my growing unease. Before I knew it, Jerome was administering some kind of injection. I started to feel woozy and disoriented, and within seconds, everything went black. When I came to, I was groggy and confused. I was still in the examination room, but something wasn't right. My clothes were disheveled and I had a pounding headache. Slowly, the realization dawned on me. I'd been drugged. Horror washed over me as I tried to piece together what had happened. Had he? The very thought made me sick to my stomach. I frantically looked around the room, searching for a way out. The door was locked. Panicked, I started banging on it and yelling, but no one came. I had no idea how long I had been unconscious or where exactly I was. For all I knew, I could be miles away from home. As the effects of the drug began to wear off, the adrenaline kicked in and I started to feel more alert. I carefully scanned the room, desperate to find something, anything, that could help me escape. My eyes landed on a scalpel sitting on a tray nearby. Mustering all my strength, I lunged for it, clutching it tightly in my hand. I don't know how long I waited, listening intently for any sign of movement outside the door. When I finally heard footsteps approaching, my heart started pounding. I gripped the scalpel, ready to defend myself. The door swung open, and there was Jerome smiling down at me. Forcing myself to stay composed, I pleaded with him to let me go. Please, I won't tell anyone what happened. Just let me leave, I begged, my voice trembling. His grin widened. Oh, but I'm not done with you yet. With that, he lunged towards me. I acted on pure instinct, slashing at him with the scalpel. He howled in pain as blood gushed from a deep gash in his arm. Seizing the opportunity, I scrambled off the table and bolted for the door. I ran blindly down an unfamiliar hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I had to get as far away from that monster as possible. Reaching a set of stairs, I flew down them, taking them two at a time. Finally, I burst out the front door and found myself on a quiet residential street. I ran and ran, not stopping until I reached a main road. Flagging down the first car I saw, I frantically explained what had happened and begged the startled driver to call the police. As the adrenaline wore off, I collapsed in the back seat, shaking uncontrollably. The reality of what had almost happened to me was just starting to sink in. I'd gone on a Tinder date, expecting a fun night out, and instead I'd narrowly escaped a nightmare. The police arrived quickly, and I gave them a detailed account of everything that had transpired. They searched the apartment but found no trace of Jerome. He had vanished. I spent the rest of the night at the station, giving statements and answering countless questions. In the days that followed, I was a wreck. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I could barely function. The trauma of that night haunted me, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified that Jerome would come after me. The thought of ever using Tinder again made me sick to my stomach. Ultimately, the police were unable to locate Jerome. He had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving no trail behind. I'm told they're still searching for him, but I've lost all hope of ever seeing justice served. All I can do is try to move on with my life, though the scars of that fateful Tinder date will never fully heal. I started seeing a therapist to help me process the trauma. She was kind and understanding, helping me work through the fear and anxiety I felt every day. With her guidance, I began taking small steps to reclaim my life. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and family who kept me grounded. I took up yoga and meditation to relieve my stress and regain a sense of calm. While I still struggle with the residual trauma, therapy and self-care have made me stronger. I refuse to let that monster destroy me or keep me living in fear. Some nights I still have vivid nightmares, forcing me to relive every chilling moment in vivid detail all over again. But when I wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, I use the breathing techniques my therapist taught me. I tell myself I am safe now. The police have not given up, but with each passing day I lose a little more hope that Jerome will ever be caught. I used to scour the internet for any shred of information, convinced that someday there would be a breakthrough. But now I know I may never get the closure I seek. I have to make peace with the fact that he is still out there somewhere, perhaps stalking his next unsuspecting victim. While I'll always carry the emotional scars from that horrific night, I'm a survivor. I won't let one evil act define who I am or destroy my spirit. If anything, it has made me more compassionate, cherishing every small joy in life. I'm healing one day at a time. What happened can never be undone, but I alone have the power to move forward with courage. It was just another regular Tuesday night when I decided to open up Tinder and swipe through potential matches. I had been single for a few months since my last relationship ended and figured I should try to get back out there. As I swiped, most faces blurred together into a sea of average-looking men. That is until his face popped up. This guy was gorgeous. Tall, muscular but lean, piercing blue eyes that seemed to stare into my soul. His profile said his name was Jeremy and that he was 29 years old. I hesitated for a moment before swiping right and matching with him. We began chatting and really hit it off. Jeremy was so easy to talk to and made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. After a few days, he asked me out on a proper date. I was ecstatic and spent way too much time picking out the perfect outfit. When Friday finally rolled around, I did my hair and makeup and then headed to the restaurant we had picked out. I got there a few minutes early and slid into the booth while I waited nervously. A tall figure appeared in my periphery and I looked up to see Jeremy standing there looking even better than his photos. He flashed me a bright smile and I became mesmerized, barely hearing his greeting. We sat across from each other and fell into effortless conversation. I could not believe this incredible man was interested in plain old me. The date was perfect. Amazing food, flowing drinks, and electric chemistry between us. After dinner, Jeremy asked if I wanted to continue the date back at his place. In my euphoric state, I threw caution to the wind and agreed. We took a rideshare back to his surprisingly nice downtown loft. He gave me the tour and we settled onto the couch with glasses of wine. I snuggled up against his strong chest as he stroked my hair. This felt too good to be true. At some point, I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, I was jolting awake in a strange room. It took me a moment to orient myself and realize I was still in Jeremy's apartment, but he had moved me to what looked like a basement converted into a bedroom. My heart began to race as I tried to open the door, but found it locked from the outside. After what felt like hours of screaming and pounding the walls, the door flew open to reveal a very different-looking Jeremy. Gone was the handsome facade. This monster had a sick grin and cold, dark eyes. He informed me that I was to be trained and sold into a trafficking ring. My blood ran cold and I pleaded for him to let me go. But Jeremy just chuckled and told me there was no use fighting my fate. Over the next weeks, I was subjected to horrors I never could have imagined. Jeremy used manipulation, threats, violence, and drugs to assert his control over me. I was allowed no freedom or dignity. Each day my spirit was chipped away, leaving me a hollow shell of my former self. Jeremy would keep me locked in the basement for days on end with no human contact except for when he would come down to torment me. He barely fed me enough scraps to survive. I lost track of time and wondered if I would ever be free of this nightmare. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Jeremy started inviting his friends over to see me. These terrifying men would leer at me through the bars on the basement windows. Sometimes Jeremy would open the door and let them come downstairs to grope me while I cried. After what I think was about a month in captivity, Jeremy told me he had found a buyer for me overseas. My blood turned to ice as he described what my life would be like as an international slave. I pleaded and pleaded with him not to go through with it, but he just slapped me across the face and said the deal was already done. The next couple of days were a blur of abject fear and despair as I waited for my fate. Then one night, I heard angry voices upstairs. There was some kind of scuffle and shouting, then the sound of people running out the front door. After an hour of silence, I worked up the courage to try the basement door. To my utter shock, it was unlocked. With my heart pounding, I crept up the stairs and peeked around the corner. The loft was totally empty. I bolted to the front door, praying this was not a trap. turned the knob, and stumbled outside into the night. I was free. I ran aimlessly through the dark streets, sobbing with relief. I had no idea where I was, but knew I had to get as far away from Jeremy's loft as possible. After what felt like miles, I finally collapsed from exhaustion in the doorway of an office building. As the sun rose, people began arriving at work and spotted me curled up on the ground. One kind woman rushed over to help. I was too weak to explain much, but begged her to call the police. She sat with me, assuring me I was safe now. Soon the police arrived along with an ambulance to take me to the hospital. There I was cleaned up, examined, and able to tell them my story. The detectives were shocked and outraged at what I had endured. They had no idea Jeremy was really a dangerous trafficker. I learned Jeremy had been arrested the night of my escape in a vice sting operation. He was now behind bars and could never hurt me again. The police searched his loft and found evidence of his crimes along with belongings of other possible victims. It has been a long road, but I am slowly healing both physically and mentally from my trauma. My friends and family have been endlessly supportive, reassuring me that none of this was my fault. I still have nightmares and panic attacks, but each day gets a little easier. Though I may never fully recover from what he put me through, I refuse to let Jeremy ruin the rest of my life. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.